Thank you so much, Sam. Hi, everyone. It is so wonderful to be with you as always. I am calling in today from not my usual place, my living room in Oakland, California, but actually from the Aleph Kala. That's an annual convening of the Jewish Renewal Movement taking place this year in Westchester, Pennsylvania. So I've been really immersing this week in Jewish spiritual practice, and I'm just feeling particularly in touch with and grateful for the power of this practice and the beauty and the power, the beauty, just the extraordinary gifts that can emerge in this integration of Torah wisdom and Jewish spirituality and mindfulness practice. So feeling grateful that I can join you today from here to sit into Shabbat with you. And so, as always, drawing inspiration from the weekly Parsha. This week's Parshat Pinchas, contains within it a momentous and significant story, as many of our Parshas do, which is that of the daughters of Zelophehad. You might be familiar of this story, which is, to me, significant and revolutionary in many ways. And I'll name a few of them. Not only does this story feature 5 named women, which is not necessarily so common in the Torah, right? Who step up and speak out and actually change the course of Jewish law, but the divine actually approves of their request. So this powerful story sets a precedent for us regarding what is possible in the necessary evolutions and revolutions of our laws and our ways of life and ways of being, and offers us some guidance and some wisdom regarding what it takes to enact the kinds of changes and evolutions that can bring us towards a more equitable and just, compassionate world. And I'm drawing a lot of inspiration for today's teaching from my dear teacher and friend, Yael Shai, who lifts out 2 words in the description of what happens in this story as a teaching for us regarding what it takes to stand up for what is right in the world, and even to simply ask for what we want, what we know that we want and need for ourselves and our own lives. So the Parsha reads, I'll just read it in English today, that the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of Manasseh, the son of Yosef, came forward. They came forward, and his daughters' names were Machla, Noah, Chagla, Milcha, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses and before Eleazar the Kohen and before the chieftains and the entire congregation at the entrance to the tent of meeting. You can just imagine that for a moment. Quite a scene. These 5 women standing before Moshe and the Kohen and the chieftains and the entire congregation. And that is where they made their request. They said, our father died in the desert. He had no sons. Why should his name be eliminated from his family because he had no son? Give us a portion. Give us a portion of his inheritance along with our father's brothers. And before this moment, it had never been true that women or anyone other than men would receive inheritance. In her text study on this week, Yael Shai draws our attention to the fact that before they speak this request, they take 2 actions that require tremendous courage. The first is coming forward, the tikrav na. They came forward. And we can note that the root karav in this word is the same root actually as korban, which is sacrifice. And karav also, it means closeness, signifying intimacy. So there's something here in the relationship between coming forward, the tikravna, coming close, intimacy, and even sacrifice, offering something to that greater whole on behalf of something greater. To come forward in this way, to allow the possibility of intimacy, is to be willing to be seen and known in our vulnerability. This is an intimacy both with ourselves, right? So knowing what is true in our own experience, what we really want, what we really need, and then being willing to engage with another, or to engage, in this case, with their entire community from that place of truth, from that place of humanity. So coming close, being willing to be seen and known as we are in the ways that we actually need one another. And it's scary, right? It can be really scary, because when we speak what we want or what we need, we actually don't know if that request will be met, if it will be received. And so it requires that we stand our ground, that we actually stand in our own integrity, our own knowing of what is true. The Parsha reads, "V'ta'amodna lifnei Moshe," they stood before Moshe and Elazar and the entire congregation. So again, imagine this. It's like the Parsha can't communicate to us enough that this is like the most intimidating circumstances possible. They're in front of everyone and all the most important people at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So there is a courage, there's a boldness here, a boldness that really can only perhaps emerge from our deep belief in and our care for what we know to be true, what we know to be important. And then they ask. They take that revolutionary step to ask for what they want and what they need, and what they know actually to be just and right for the whole community, even though it had never been true before that women could inherit land. And thankfully, God says yes, Ken. God says, Zlofchad's daughters speak justly. You shall certainly give them a portion of their father's inheritance, which is beautiful. And yet they didn't know, right? They didn't know if it would be a yes or a no. We never actually know. And so what would it mean for us in our own lives if, when we are standing up and asking for what we know to be true, be that something in our own lives, or a change or an evolution or a revolutionary act in our communities, actually, what would it mean if we valued the asking itself, the coming close, the standing in what we know to be true, the willingness to be intimate, to be vulnerable, regardless of how it will be answered? If we could fully open ourselves to the possibility of either the yes or the no, right? Because a no can feel hard. And yet it's actually just true in our human experience that we don't always get what we want. A participant in a class I was teaching here at Kala asked the question, I was with my grandson at the state fair and he wanted cotton candy. And I said no, and he screamed for an hour. He was so upset that he didn't get what he wants. And the memory came to me of how when I was a kid and I would be upset that I didn't get what I wanted, because on some level, maybe in that primal young place, it feels like I should get what I want, right? And my dad would just sing. I don't know if he was singing to me or to himself, but he would sing the Rolling Stones song. You can't always get what you want. There's actually some wisdom there. It's just true. It's just true that we don't always get what we want. And there could be so many reasons for that. Maybe we're actually not ready. Or maybe our world isn't ready. Even if we think that what we want, or we know that what we want is right and true. But there can actually be some humility in acknowledging that there might be a bigger picture that we're not aware of. Perhaps something is still in motion. Or perhaps we don't actually need what we think we want and need. And the accepting of the no can be difficult. It can require the willingness to be with discomfort, and it might even require some mourning, actually, some grieving, some letting go. Of course, we just entered the 3 weeks of mourning in this month of Tammuz, affirming our tradition, our calendar is affirming to us the importance of making space to feel our grief. So there might be some letting go required in that no. And just as importantly, we can also prepare ourselves for the possibility of yes, which for some of us can be as difficult to receive as a no. What if it is true that what we want and need is actually out there and people do want to help us and support us? Can we trust ourselves to live into our yes? That we have what it takes to be revolutionary leaders like the daughters of Zlochad and lead that way towards a world of greater justice, greater compassion, greater equity. And so with that inspiration, I want to invite us into our practice for today. You can go ahead and settle into a posture that feels supportive of mindful presence, inviting the body to soften. You might close the eyes or just gently relax your focus on the floor. Noticing whatever may have been stirred up in your heart or your mind from this teaching. There's no right or wrong response. Just noticing what is here. Inviting ourselves to settle into presence. My invitation for today's sit is to look within yourself to see if there is a yearning, a longing, a desire, or a prayer, speaking to some need or some desire in your own heart that is alive in you today. Can we open to feel, to allow the vulnerability, the humanity of that yearning, that need? Can we feel the truth of it? Can we actually stand in it? Just feeling the uprightness in your spine. There's truth here. There is an integrity in our humanity, in our vulnerability. What arises if we can open to the possibility of no, that it might not be possible in the way that we think, that we or the world may not be quite ready. Is there resource available to us in this moment to meet whatever arises and the possibility of that no? What might it feel like to let go? And can we open to the possibility of yes, that it might actually be possible or even already here? If we can open to it, if we have the courage to come close to it, to stand in it, to ask for it. Can we open to the value, to the beauty of simply feeling it, allowing it to be true, to come to life in us, of standing in it, regardless of what might happen. Yainai, yainai, nai. Yainai, yainai, nai. Yainai, nai. Yainai, yainai, nai. Close our practice together with a couple deep breaths. You can open your eyes if they've been closed. Maybe let them just wander around the space, taking in what is here, what's present within you, around you. Thank you all so much for coming together today, for your presence, for your practice, and may we all be blessed this Shabbat with that intimacy with ourselves, with the divine, with one another, with the integrity of standing in our truth, and with the ground always here beneath our feet, the profound resource of this very moment, even in the uncertainty of what is to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca Schisler, for your wonderful, deep guidance. We're going to turn now to Mourner's Kaddish to close our practice. If you're going to be reciting Kaddish, I want to invite you to share the name of the individual or folks for whom you're reciting Kaddish. And I'll invite our friend Jet Bachman to put Kaddish up on the screen. And I want to invite you to rise in body or in spirit to join me in the Mourner's Kaddish. Nit Gadal,
All the Israel, Vishnu Rabba Mavara,
Shalom, Shalom, Aleinu v'Yokol Yisrael.
May the memory of those past inspire us to acts of loving kindness, wisdom, compassion, and justice. And let us say Amen. Thank you, Rebecca, for guiding us today in that beautiful, deep, rich practice. Those who would like to are welcome to stay on for 15 minutes more for some Q&A. And if you are leaving now, I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom. May all of the deep wishes of your heart be fulfilled, l'tovah, for good. And may the Shabbat bring you deep rest, peace, restoration, and wholeness. All the very best. We'll be back here on Monday at the same time. If you're staying with us and you'd like to ask a question, I want to invite you to please write your question in the chat, prefaced by the word question in caps. And I just want to quickly make sure that I really understood Rebecca's teaching and just mirror back that what I took away, what I heard really was that following the model of the daughters of Tzlofchad, who both approach and come close and offer their vulnerability in advocating for a deep need, a deep cause, a deep desire for the legal and social order to change toward and bend toward greater justice and compassion and equity. And who also, in addition to that kind of vulnerable place, really stood firm in their stance in what was perhaps an intimidating situation. And in so doing, actually did succeed in changing the order of things for the better, toward greater equity and inclusion and egalitarianism and justice. And Rebecca, you so beautifully and compassionately invited us to embody that in our practice, but also to explore the ways in which perhaps the deepest yearnings of our heart to move ourselves and our whole world toward greater humanity and compassion and justice may be met with a no. And that sometimes that's inevitable in our spiritual work and in our work of tikkun ha'olam, world repair. And that there's merit even so in just approaching and making ourselves vulnerable and standing in our stance with integrity and love and resolve. And then in practice, we can really explore, how to really honor and meet our deepest yearnings for ourselves, for the world, and B, prepare ourselves for the possibility that indeed there may be a no, or perhaps a yes, depending on the circumstances that may be prevalent during the time in which we live. So first of all, I just want to make sure I got that right.
Yeah.
Great. And a quick follow-up question that I have, I think you're so beautifully speaking here to something that's so near and dear to my own heart, which is the integral relationship really between tikkun hanefesh, the work of cultivating greater wholeness, self-acceptance, awareness, deepening our capacity to be with what's true in our own experience, to be with our own yearnings for our own spiritual growth and evolution and development. All of that work in this teaching that you provided, right, is so integrally connected with the work of tikkun ha'olam, of world repair. So I'm wondering if you might speak a little bit about how this manifests in your own practice and experience, this kind of link between the inner work and the outer work, between the work of inner healing and repair and outer movement and advocacy toward greater justice and dismantling systems of oppression.
Thank you. Such an important question and also a real passion point for me. I think there's a very common misconception, false dichotomy that often arises around spirituality, which is this belief that spirituality is somehow separate or even in contradiction to or in competition with social justice, right? That spirituality can be kind of a navel-gazing or self-absorption, while social justice and the work of social equity is about caring for others and caring for the world. And what I actually experienced to be true, both in my own life and also in movements that I'm a part of and friends and other folks that I encounter that are similarly to me really devoted to tikkun olam and to healing the world, is that those two things are actually two sides of the same coin, that they need each other and that they're absolutely not separate. And actually, it's when we are coming from that place of deep self-awareness and self-care with the skills and the care to care for ourselves well, then we are able to, from the inside, from that place, offer that to the world as well. And when we are not getting what we need, when we're not showing up with our own presence and awareness, we burn out. We're less aware of others in the world. So even of how our help is needed and how to offer it, where to offer it. And there's just some kind of disconnect there. And similarly, if we're only focused on our own needs without the awareness of the greater whole and how we are in connection to others, there's something totally missing there. That's where we, our actions might even be leading to perhaps more disconnection than connection. And we're actually also cutting ourselves off from guidance and wisdom, the profound guidance and wisdom that is available to us when we are in alignment with and paying attention to the greater wholes, the networks that we're all a part of. Because one of the most fundamental insights that we really come to in our practice is the truth of our interconnectivity, that we do not exist in isolation, that none of the parts within ourselves, meaning my body, actually doesn't exist in isolation from my heart or my soul or my mind. Within ourselves, we are one, it's all connected, and without ourselves to one another and to this earth, we're deeply connected. And so, something that I think is also really interesting is that when we really attune to some need within ourselves or some lack, and we're in the truth of that, it's often also in some way systemic or relatable to other people who potentially share similar identities or other experiences to us. So of course, the daughters of Zelophehad were speaking up and asking for their own need. They needed land. They needed to still have a home and a family, even though their father died. And they saw that there was actually an injustice there. And in asking for their own need to be met and standing up for that, they ended up having an extraordinary ripple on the community as well. And I definitely experienced that in my own life, that when I come from that place of self-advocacy, especially where there's a need that has to do with any one of my identities, my experience in the world as a woman, or as a person in their 30s in this moment on the planet, or as a Jew, as an American, so often other folks can relate as well. And then we can all help one another actually and hold the burden together, because so much of our experience is shared.
Thanks for that clear and compelling response, Rebecca. It really helps me in my own thinking about the question and feeling into the question. We have a question here from Lester Shane. How do you discern the difference between a yes that is true and a yes that is a rationalization or a justification, and conversely, a no that is good or a no that is a result of fear and procrastination?
Yeah, it's interesting. One question that arises for me in response to that question is, to whom are we making our request? So I might have a need met that I need to get met. Let's say, if I have a job and I want to be making more money, I might ask my employer, hey, can you raise my salary? But I might also pray to God, like, Holy One, may I have my needs met? May I have what I need to live my life and do have my right livelihood, to do my work, in a way that I can really be provided for, and really do that inner work of, in some way, opening and readying myself to receive the possibility of that yes. I find for myself with the prayer, when it's God to whom I'm speaking, I find that there's something about choosing to affirm to myself the possibility of divine support, and the practice of emunah, of faith, relaxes me in such a way that I can even become more aware of potential sources of that kind of stability or abundance or whatever it is I'm seeking, maybe in ways that are unexpected to me, right? Mm-hmm. So that's just one thing. And then as far as when we're engaging with other people and asking for things, and there's a no and there's a yes, I think for myself, the discernment of whether something is coming from a place of love or a place of fear is like an intuitive knowing that depends completely on the moment and the circumstance. But it's like an energy that can be felt, right? Is someone coming from love, or is there constriction there? And then as to how to respond to that, again, there's no formula. Unfortunately, there's no scientific, like, this is what you do in every moment. And the practice of becoming as aware as possible of what is happening in the moment, and cultivating that intuitive capacity to respond with wisdom and skill, is what helps me personally meet that person in that moment with whatever the moment is calling for, whether it's just acceptance of what they're saying, or asking them to actually negotiate with me a little bit or go deeper or unpack what's really happening.
Thanks, Rebecca. It strikes me that if we human beings, could speak from a place of genuine connection with our own needs and the yearnings of our heart instead of grounding into ideology, that we have a very different quality of discourse in our society. And I find that sometimes because the power of my own need and the possibility of being rejected or even not, right, of getting a yes is so intense and sometimes difficult, right, that I become kind of like a disembodied head and I disconnect from my my heart-centered yearnings and desires. And what a powerful practice this is, just to help us get back in touch with our core needs as human beings. We all have them, and sometimes we aren't willing to even acknowledge that we have them or allow ourselves to even feel needy.
Totally. And I think that's especially true of people with different kinds of identities and experiences in the world. I know as a woman, to use the experience I used before on asking for a salary raise, which is something that I've experienced on my career path, as women, and also probably people of other expansive genders, non-men, we're not trained actually in the same way as men are to ask for what we need. And so it can be even scarier. And so just, again, just normalizing and acknowledging how common this is, how prevalent it is, that it really can be scary to actually get in touch with and then believe in and ask for these core basic human needs. But it is revolutionary work and it benefits everyone when we can do that for ourselves.
Yeah. For me, it also sheds new light on how I might relate to the petitions that are part of the Amidah, the silent prayer. There are 13 petitions. And, certainly the way that they've been kind of depicted in our tradition is that we're importuning God, as it were, asking of God to have these needs met, right? But maybe these are just prayers that give us the permission to get in touch with our own need. Right? Our need for wisdom, our need for justice, our need for connection, our need for healing, our need for a planet that can really sustain life, and so on and so forth. So I just want to encourage everyone to have a look at those petitions again through this lens, right? Maybe they're just invitations and even giving us the green light, right, to get in touch with our own yearning and desire for how we want to be held in this world and the kind of world we want to see realized in our time. So thank you for this, Rebecca, and hope we all have a kind of a rich practice to take with us into Shabbat, although on Shabbat, we don't turn to those petitions. And yet,
we get to be in the yes, the possibility
of the possibility of yes on Shabbat. So may you all and may we all experience resounding yes in our bodies, in our hearts, in our minds, and may all of our deep desires and yearnings be fulfilled this Shabbat. And thank you again, Rebecca Schisler, for leading us so skillfully, beautifully, and graciously today. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. May you be healthy and safe and take good care. We'll see you back here.